What is good, everyone? Do we have any Alvin and the Chipmunks? I feel like I'm going to be asking this every single time for a while. That was too funny when it happened, but welcome in, everyone. We're on episode 5 already. It's good to see some other people in the chat I haven't seen in a minute. Tiago, hope you're doing well. It's been a hot minute. Welcome in, guys. We're talking QB1 today. I also had a question come in from one of the viewers, which I'm excited about because uh, sometimes we just don't get a question, so we have to come up with one that we think is relevant and what people might be wanting. And today's question is super relevant. So thanks, Joe, for your question today. I'm excited to get to that at the end of the stream. I think you guys will have a little bit of my answer for the question throughout the stream when you're listening. But there's a little bit more in depth to it, so I'm excited about it. Guys, if you have not found me on X, that's where I post if I'm running late or if we're changing times. We're really trying to do 1 o'clock as our standard time, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. When I have other people involved, I try to be flexible in case we need to move it around, or if, like on Monday's case, where I was watching my son, his bedtime is 1:15, I had to push it back to 1:30. So appreciate all of you guys being flexible. For everyone that's on the recordings on YouTube, thank you. Thank you for watching there. If you haven't followed my YouTube channel yet, there is a link both on my X channel as well as here on Kick. So get over there. We're doing a giveaway on Friday of my ranking sheet. And all you have to do to get in on that is be subscribed to my YouTube channel. And as of right now, Saad has a very high chance of winning that. So if you're willing to and you like the content and you're interested in winning my ranking sheet, which again, I will go through it a little bit more on Friday, I believe. But it is a super unique ranking sheet where you can actually customize your own numbers if you want to. You don't have to. Mine's all there, but I get very in depth with my stuff and how I got everything. So really excited about that giveaway. And as of right now, it's looking like Saad's going to be the winner. I'll still do the live pull. If he's the only subscriber besides like myself and the other couple of people that don't do fantasy football but like to watch my things anyways, it might just be his, but it's only fair because he helped me along the way as I'm picking brains of if I'm over high on some guys and under. But guys, welcome in. One other giveaway, which won't be happening for a while, especially at the pace, but once we hit 100 subscribers on YouTube, we will be giving away an autographed jersey. So stay tuned for that. As we get closer, we'll bring it back up. Today, hopefully, will actually be a relatively shorter on-time stream. We're going to be under an hour for sure. I'm hoping maybe even 45 minutes. We'll see. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about with these guys, though. I know that QB1 rankings in general are typically much more standard. You don't see as much variance as you do with our QB2s. I know we had a lot of shockers on that. And honestly, I think something that's important to mention is you have to stay a little bit, like, you can't be stuck on your takes, right? So just because I have Caleb Williams as low as I have him, he throughout the offseason, there's going to be things that happen still that will change my rankings. He's going to shift. Also, that was a consensus ranking between San and I, so I'm a little bit different on some of those, but in general, that's pretty close to where most of my feelings are. We'll see when we go live on Friday. For anyone that's interested in buying my ranking sheet, see my actual numbers. They may vary a bit there, but it's important to kind of stay fluid with that and be able to adjust as the season goes on, barring any catastrophic injuries and things, which we often do see, injuries, holdouts, those sort of things. Most of the rankings won't change excessively, but the great thing about my ranking sheet is that it will be updated live anytime news is hitting. So there's a little ad for the ranking sheet. We're going to jump into our QB rankings, number 1 through 12. We're going to start at 12. And this is actually someone that I have found I probably will be targeting a lot because of where they're being picked. It's a little bit of a high risk person, which is a weird thing to say, and I didn't think I'd say it around this person's name, but because of the situation and all the changes that have happened in the offseason, it's a little bit hard to fall in love with this guy, and I think his upside is not is not huge, which is one of the reasons he's sitting at 12, but he's done it before. We're gonna talk about Justin Herbert at number 12. Last year he only played 13 games and was QB 18. So if you factor in the other games, that's probably a QB1 still at that rate. He had a lot of injuries throughout the season, himself and players on the team with his receiving core, and now we see coaching changes of Jim Harbaugh coming in. I also just botched his last name, but I'm not going to try and say it again because it's a tongue twister for me for some reason. That's going to be a very different dynamic than what they had before. You lost both of your leading receivers. Now, given, I think you have to remember how infrequently Mike Williams was on the field. But Keenan Allen was a huge, huge, huge piece in that offense, whether he was on the field, even, I mean, off, it's a leadership role that is now gone. So you're seeing a completely different receiver room there. And a lot of young guys who haven't really done it, haven't been the number one. You got a guy like DJ Chark coming in. You drafted people in Lad McConkey and Brendan Rice. You have Joshua Palmer, who was there last year, who was kind of Mr. Consistent through some of the injuries. And then their rookie last year, Quentin Johnson, who I have very little faith in after watching him. He was horrendous to watch, but people change, people improve. Yeah, you can't fully write them out. I will say, of people that I want to fully write out, man, do I want to write him off. But there's still time. Also, freshen up, Crow. Thank you for this great Greedberry. So he comes in at number 12 for me as kind of a safe. He's such a talented QB. He's going to put up consistent numbers. And honestly, I mean, if Lad McConkey or Rice or Chark or some of these guys that are coming in end up playing well and creating some separation, he has that upside to still throw for that 4,000 yards and a bunch of touchdowns. It's just a little bit scary for a QB1. But the reason I like him and see myself getting him is at ADP right now in Best Ball. So Best Ball is right now what I use for my ADP. For those that don't know what Best Ball is, you should definitely check it out. We're going to be doing some Best Ball stuff coming up soon. But it's a way to do lots of drafts, and you don't have to manage your team throughout the year. It's also just where a lot of people that are obsessed with football are on here all off season long. So if you want to see a pretty accurate rankings, I would say in general, of where people will probably be going, I use Best Ball in order to see where people are being taken. And right now in Best Ball, he's being drafted ADP at 132 in QB19. Now, he played 13 games last season, was QB 18 without playing a full season, missing 4 games. So it's one of those, I think he is just going to be consistent. I don't think it's something that's a flashy pick, but taking him as the 19th QB off the board, he's probably your QB2 at that point if you're taking him, or maybe you did a really long strategy where you are doing a lot of running backs and receivers. I would be happy with him as kind of a late QB target. But I will say, of all the other QBs, he's a tier break back for me. So he's looped in with that kind of 13 of Tua and those guys. So that for me, he's on a similar page as them. So I want to make sure I specify that before we jump into number 11, which I kind of have on a tier of their own. My QB11 has a good amount of upside in regards to that. Last year, they ended as QB6. They played 16 games, only missing the final game of the season, I believe. I'd have to double check. There's one game where they got injured, but it was right around the fourth quarter, and the backup came in and played for a small bit, but I think they were back the following week. So they were QB6 last year, so that's a pretty nice position to be in. It's hard because I could see them having the upside of getting back to that QB6 level, somewhere around there. But I don't see a scenario where they end up in the top 5. So for me, I think a couple of the next guys that we're going to talk about, I see scenarios where all of them could end up in a top 5 QB spot. This player, I don't really see that. but I think you'd be very happy week in and week out with him. So I put him in his own tier. I definitely would take him over Herbert. So he's currently going at ADP 109, which is QB15. So I think he's also a value for where he's being drafted. I think he's being a little bit disrespected. And this is Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy had a really good year. I don't think if you were playing him week in and week out, you were obsessed with your QB and talking about how incredible he was, but he's consistently there. He has an amazing offense that's going to score points. Now, there still is time for something to happen in regards to that receiving core. Ayuk could still be traded. I think we've passed the point of Debo, and Saad and I were talking about this morning because he would have had to been traded by June 1st to really help their cap space. So it'd almost feel foolish if they traded Debo in the next week or two or month. So you have a really good receiver core. If it stays intact, he's definitely staying right around here. If not, maybe even slightly moving up. They bring in another rookie receiver. Otherwise, they don't lose much. They really didn't lose anything. They added another receiver piece, and he was QB6 last year. I just think it's not a sexy pick. And then, like I mentioned before, the upside of how high he could be is lower than some of those other guys. But he's going into year 3. It's not like he's been in the league and has consistently been right at that, back and middle of QB1s. That was year 2. He was QB6. So maybe I'm underselling him a bit, and maybe he has more upside than that. But when you start looking at some of these other QBs we're about to talk about, I just like the upside of all of them a lot more, and I think they all have a similar floor as he does. So I'm not going to spend too much time on him. Also, I forgot to mention backups. I know Jay likes to talk backups. His backup is Joshua Dobbs this year. If he went down, Josh Dobbs coming in, he did it last year where he was effective for fantasy. Obviously, the receiving weapons probably drop a bit with Joshua Dobbs there. McCaffrey stays the same because McCaffrey is just a different tier in and of himself. So, it would definitely be a drop off from the receiver perspective, but Joshua Dobbs is someone in this offense I'd be happy potentially playing if I lost my Brock Purdy and he was my QB1. So jumping down again, I said he was kind of in a tier of his own. So now we're going to hit this next tier, which most of these guys are actually much more on the pass heavy, less running, with the exception of one of the QBs. There's going to be 4 guys that we're going to talk about here. And this next QB, his upside is really through the roof, but I'm really nervous to the point, and Saad's not going to like this, of he's kind of on a do not draft list for me. Now, there's always exceptions with those players if they drop far enough. I'm nervous for injuries with this guy and what he's still recovering from. And this is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was QB25. He only played 10 games last year. So on that basis, again, would have been a QB1 if he played out the whole year. When Joe is on the field with that receiving core and how talented he is, he's incredible. There's not many people that throw it better than Joe. But with his injury to his hand/wrist, there's still a lot of concerning talks about it, and we're now in June. Now, there's a lot of stuff in the offseason that you're going to hear. It's hard to know what's real, what's not real. But if he has an issue gripping that ball or turning the wrist, that's a big deal. So I'm a little bit off. As we get closer to the season, he, I think, out of these QBs, has the most opportunity to skyrocket for me if really we're seeing it and there's no issues. As for like ADP wise, this is also why I don't really see myself getting him. ADP is 78, QB7. So I have him at 10. If he was the top of this tier, and I like tier rankings, so I think for me, like, he does get to my 7 QB because it'd be 10 through 7. Maybe I could see him if he dropped a little bit, taking him if he starts being more healthy. But as of right now, where he's being drafted at the top of that. Like, he'd have to be the top of these tier guys for me to consider him. So I'm not going to have my shares of him. Now, his upside is huge. He could be, I think, all the way up to QB3. I don't see a scenario where he's 1 or 2, but I could really see him being top end. which we'll see with all of these next guys. All of them have that potential to be that kind of up to, QB3. He's done it before. He could do it again. It's just the injury concerns for him. He has an amazing receiving core. His running back room is a little bit lesser. Joe Mixon is definitely a better asset than why am I blanking on his name, from the Colts last year, and he was with the Bills before that. So there's a difference here. I I think Joe will have a good year. I don't doubt if he's healthy the whole season, he's easily top 12 QB. And then if he's healthy and like playing at full level, he's gonna probably be around that fifth. I'd put him around 5. So there is plenty of upside with him. I just am concerned with the injuries. So that's your take and where you see him and staying healthy. Just be watching that injury, watching the reports. Try and see if you can watch his throws, see if it looks different. The last things I saw it looked like he was still struggling. So there's still a lot of time till the offseason, so that's gonna jump a lot. Jumping over to our QB9. This is someone I actually thought I would have higher, and I have found myself taking an insane amount of this player. He's actually my number 2. I think number 2. I'd have to go back to my exposure charts. Number 2 QB that I've been taking in best ball. This guy is going ADP 91, QB 11. I have him at 9, so not significantly off from ADP, but where he's dropping to, I do find myself snagging him, especially if I miss out on my other QB that I have the most share of. But this is Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott was just QB3 last year. He played a full 17 games. They're going to pass heavy. They don't have a run game. They'll have maybe slightly more of a run game this year, but even then, I'm terrified of that running game. The one thing I know is if him and CeeDee Lamb are healthy, they're going to be passing. They're going to be over 4,000 yards. They're going to have touchdowns. Now, I would caution maybe if it has high interceptions, maybe drops a little bit back. But I mean, Dak's upside is to get to that kind of QB3 again. I don't think he breaks into top 2, but he is. He's a great QB that I am super excited about where he's going. He's not being respected. And for those that know me as an Eagles fan, but also I don't think he's a great QB. So when I say great QB, I mean for fantasy. But for fantasy, he's a great fantasy QB. You'd be happy with him. He's going as QB 11, so you can snag him before that. And I think you have someone with a lot of upside and maybe the safest floor. You're not gonna have many bad weeks with Dak Prescott. So that I really like him for where he's going. Backup is Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush has come in and been fine, kept them afloat. You definitely see a shift in the offense not being as good, but it's honestly not a crazy drop off, which kind of talks about that receiving core and how good CeeDee Lamb is at creating separation in space so that he can be open for any QB to step in. Obviously, the offense takes a step back with Cooper in, but people like CeeDee Lamb won't be too affected. He will not be receiver 1 if Dak Prescott went down early, but Cooper Rush would be someone you probably could play in fantasy. Wouldn't end as a top 12, though. Jumping my number 8. This one is a very kind of risky, volatile pick here. I think his upside is so high. This is one where when I did my rankings, I expected to maybe have Dak and this person flipped. This guy did end up above, so I kept him there for the purpose of this stream. But again, this tier of Burrow, Dak, and these next 2, I could see any of them kind of flipping around. This is my personal preference of them. But this guy and Dak I have pretty much exactly the same. I just think the upside might be even slightly higher on this player. It's Anthony Richardson. He ended at QB 39, but only played 4 games last year. He was a rookie. We've seen very, very, very little. It's really, really hard to rank Anthony Richardson. I'm not a huge fan long term, but I am a huge fan of the Colts, their coach, their offense, and what they could be this year. I think they have a sleeper team that can make playoffs. I think for fantasy purpose, especially, my general rankings is off of a 4 point per passing touchdown. So if this is a 6 point passing touchdown, he definitely goes behind Burrow and Prescott and the guys above him. Honestly, probably could potentially drop behind Perk. I don't know. Purdy. I just said Perk. I don't know what's wrong with me. Behind Purdy. But he's very volatile. Hard to really know what you're getting with only playing 4 games. He's someone that I've probably watched those 4 games over and over and over. And there are so many moments where I'm like, dang, that throw was phenomenal. He has this one where he scrambles out. First, he does his first 2 progressions. They're pretty covered. Maybe you could get a ball to one of them. I like to watch all 22 so you can see the routes as well. And then he gets pressured from the right. He scrambles under, goes out to the right, and he has this sidearm throw about 17 yards up the field that is just a laser and hits his receiver perfectly in stride. And you're like, whew, this man can throw. And then you'll have the stupidest throw. I'm like, what are you thinking? But what he can do with his legs and the upside on rushing, I have him statted out very high on his rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. I think he'll take a lot of those goal line touches as well in regards to taking the touchdowns, kind of like what you've seen from Jalen Hurts with the tush push. So in regards to fantasy points, I put him in this category. I have him at QB8. I'm behind consensus, so I'm further behind what he is being drafted. He's being drafted at ADP 56, which is QB6. So I'm behind consensus by 2. I don't find myself taking a lot of him. I am all for some high risk players, but typically at the QB spot, and because of who I have above him that I can get later, I don't find myself taking him at all. But he does bring a lot of upside, especially that run game and in 4 point per passing leagues. You're just taking a risk with him. His upside, I think of these guys, I said all these guys are kind of like upside of QB3. He has the upside of QB1. He does, just because of the rushing aspect of if he ends up being a decent passer, throwing for somewhere near 4,000, which I do not stat him out near 4,000. I have him below that, but also runs for say 600. Then we're talking if he's at that 12 to 15 touchdown rushing, 20 something touchdowns passing for 3,800 yards, that sort of thing. I mean, he can make a case for that top 3 player. So that's why he's at 8, and he's definitely being drafted as if he is going to be successful and healthy for the year. So I don't find myself taking him a lot, but I see the opportunity. His backup is Joe Flacco, which if Joe Flacco comes in, you see what he did with the Browns. I don't expect the same type of passing from him, but imagine if he did the same type of passing, what that would do for Pittman, Adonai Mitchell, Jonathan Taylor's touchdown upticks would go up. Like, in regards to fantasy, it could end up helping a lot of the fantasy guys. I just don't see Joe Flacco necessarily doing what he did with the Browns last year. But it's not a bad backup situation if Joe Flacco has kept himself well enough where he can come and do at least close to what he did with the Browns last year. Jumping over to the last person of this tier, someone that I think of this tier, I debated putting him in the next tier up. And honestly, maybe by the time the season starts, I will. I'm a huge fan of this person as well. I guess when I said I have a lot of Dak Prescott, it's kind of probably like a 50-50 with Dak and Jordan Love. Again, I don't have my exact exposure here, but my next guy is Jordan Love. He was QB5 last year, played all 17 games. You have a young offense that is really clicking. Right now, he's being drafted as QB12. ADP is 92. I will find myself taking a lot of him. He is someone that I think will be week in and week out a good passing QB. I have them statted out as a team for around, I think it was 4,200 yards this season and 30 passing touchdowns. It's an offense that I want the shares in. It's trying to predict the right shares in regards to the receivers is it going to be Reed, Watson, Dobbs, Wicks, any of those guys. I have my projections of who it's going to be, and if you are interested in knowing mine, I will have my rankings live on Friday. But I'm all in. I think Jordan Love is the real deal. I think he'll continue to be a good QB. He'll probably get a contract. It sounded like they were trying to work a contract this offseason for him. I think, unless I'm confusing him with someone else right now. I heard that maybe yesterday. Um, he's someone who's going to be week in, week out, good QB. Your upside, I think, is right around where he finished last year to maybe QB3. So like 3 to 5. But I think the worst I see him doing without getting injured is like 8. So he's someone I really like. And the only reason he's not in the tier above is just the upside of these next like number 1 through 6. I They just have more upside. I think consistency wise, he's right there with the next tier. Um, but I think the upside is just a little higher in the other guys. His backup is Sean Clifford. I haven't seen anything with that guy, so I don't know what to expect. I would expect a significant drop off. It's hard to imagine someone stepping in and being as successful as Jordan Love has been, and he really was able to be groomed under Aaron Rodgers over those years. So huge fan of Jordan Love, and especially going at QB12. I'm going to find plenty of times where I'm taking him in a draft, and very happy with where I'm taking him. So now we're going to my next tier break. This is going to be 2 players in this tier break. Both of these players have absolute incredible upside. There's definitely some risk involved with both, and I'll explain with each one where that risk is. Obviously, once you start getting like 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ideally you'd love no risk at all, right? Like you'd love it to be, if you're taking one of these guys, you're probably paying for it, right? But my number 6 guy is going at QB5, so I have him right at kind of ADP and where he's going. It's CJ Stroud. So CJ Stroud finished as QB9 last year, only played 15 games, so people forget he missed 2 games. But he finished at QB9, so with the extra 2 games, that probably puts him right around the same spot of like 5, 6 range. Absolutely incredible. Rookie that wasn't even the first pick in the draft, second guy. He was phenomenal. They just added Stephon Diggs. Big move for them there. Even if Diggs is a shell of himself, he doesn't need to be the one here. They signed Nico Collins. You have Tank Dell, who looks like he's healthy. Tank Dell, if no one has listened to CJ Stroud's podcast with Micah Parsons, he talks about Dell as if he is the best receiver in the league. Like he just loves the man. So him healthy is going to be awesome. And it's very hard to see a scenario where they fail. Now, when I said there's risk involved with these 2 guys, I think for CJ Stroud, the risk is we've seen players come in as rookies, dominate as rookies, struggle as teams figure them out. Now, with Stroud in the way he plays, he's a smart QB, very accurate, has a good ball. It's not like he was pulling some tricks and scrambling and those sort of things that led to his success. So, in regards to him potentially doing worse than he did last year, I don't really see it. There's a case for it because he's only going into year 2. But between his mentality, the roster he has, his coach, obsessed with his coach, you just have an amazing situation for this kid. And I think he's going to have an absolute incredible year. Really love him. And I think you could go either way with him and number 5. In my rankings, I think they were within like 3 points on my rankings. So you could go either one. It's really 5A, 5B for me between these 2 players. So CJ Stroud, awesome. Backup is Mills. We saw what happens with Mills in there. It's not going to be pretty. Really hope that Stroud is healthy and playing the whole year. We don't want to see him come in. But CJ Stroud, awesome guy. I have less shares of him because he's being drafted at kind of my ADP and where I have him ranked. And this next guy, who I gave him the edge only because of my absolute love and obsession with him. He is my number 1 drafted QB in all of this. I think his upside is through the roof, But he has more risk. He has much more risk than Stroud, so maybe I should probably flip them. But I couldn't help my love for him, so I did put him above Stroud, even though he probably should be one below him. He was QB26 last year, but he only played 8 games, and not even 8 full games. So he's being drafted as the QB8. So positionally, he's being drafted, 2 to 3 spots behind where I draft him. His ADP is 80. And I love this guy. I have such a high share of him. I'm going to continue to target him. I could see him kind of continue to move up. I have seen him move up because he used to be ADP around 10 when I first started doing the best balls this offseason. We're talking about Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray added Marvin Harrison Jr. Last year, an interesting thing when you go back and watch their year, they were competing against every single team. And then in the fourth quarter, they're like, oh, yeah, we're supposed to lose. And then fell apart in the fourth quarter. And then when Kyler could be back and he was healthy, because he was healthier earlier than they played him, they're like, we're going to kind of hold off. And it very much felt like, hey, we need a tank for this pick. Let's hold off on bringing him back, give him the extra space to make sure that he fully is healthy. He was healthy by the end of the year. So we're not talking about a guy who got injured and missed the ending half of the season, is coming back from the end. He's healthy. He will be there for training camp and all of that. When Kyler is on the field and when he is playing, we see consistent top 5 scoring numbers at QB. He's done this before. He's been there when he's on the field. He's incredible with the way he can utilize his legs and pass the ball. He now finally has, given that if Marvin Harrison is what he seems to be, I know we're talking about a rookie as if he is a for sure locked in thing, but if you haven't watched his tape, it's really hard not to believe that. So this is another part of that risk aspect. If he is even close to what we think he is, but he also has like Trey McBride from last year, who was absolutely incredible. And Michael Wilson will be, fine. I don't think he was a bad receiver. I am so high on this offense and what they could do, and Kyler Murray for fantasy points. I wouldn't be shocked if he was top 3 in fantasy points this year. And where he's being drafted at QB8 is, I think it's fair. I think it's fair for the risk that's involved with him. But I am finding myself taking him all the time. And when I happen to miss on him, well, we'll get into that later. But I love Kyler. I am very big on him. Like I said, is CJ Stroud, I had them statted out within a couple of points of each other. CJ Stroud should probably be 5 and Kyler 6. But because of my love for him, I knocked him up just a little bit. So take that with a grain of salt. But that's a tier break for me right there between those two guys. And then we come into the top 4, which I think if you look at pretty much any rankings, this is probably a pretty consensus top 4 across the board in regards to these 4 players. And then my ranking may or may not surprise you. We'll have to see. I will say, before I get into them, so this is all, I have them all bunched into one tier. I debated putting my QB1 in their own tier. I have my QB1 versus my QB2 about 30 points different as of right now. I haven't finished all of my tweaking, which I'll be doing in the next 2 days before we launch. And then obviously we'll keep it live as we continue to go on. But my QB1, I do have a chunk above these next 3 we'll talk about. But let's jump into it. Number 4. Patrick Mahomes. He was QB8 last year, which kind of felt disappointing to a lot of people. I think he was drafted much higher. He was drafted as QB1 or 2 often, 3 at the latest. But he played 16 games, ended at QB8. His ADP right now is right at where I have him, QB4, ADP 48. We have a QB who always gets it done. He's always going to be that top end. He's going to be consistent. We have some question marks at receiver. And I think right now with him at 4, there is a chance, say, Rashee Rice doesn't get suspended at all. and he's there. And we continue to see things in training camp of maybe some of the other receivers developing. If like Hollywood is doing better, and we're not seeing the crap tapes of their rook just dropping balls, maybe he'll jump up to 3. I maybe 2, but again, these guys are in the same tier as each other. I just I don't see how he fails this year, barring injuries. I still think Kelsey has it enough to be playing consistently, and then when they need to, they may rest him. That's definitely a concern. But in regards to fantasy, Mahomes going to get it done with whatever's around him. He has a slightly better receiver core than he did last year, and a better offensive line. So I feel very comfortable with him at 4. I think he could move up to 3 for me, and it's Patrick Mahomes. He always has the upside of being the number 1. That's just there for him. Also, something that the fantasy footballers were talking about the other day is we've seen this year over year where he has like the best year and then slightly down, then the best year, then slightly down. This was last year's is slightly down. So if he continues his trend, and we're talking trends, it's time for him to spike up. I don't really have that much more to say about Patrick Mahomes. His backup is Carson Wentz. It's an interesting backup situation because Carson Wentz came in for Matt Ryan 2 years ago and looked better than Matt Ryan at the Colts, and he throws. He can at least throw the ball. Now, you're going to have a lot more turnovers. You're going to have some fumbles. They might lose some more games. But for fantasy purposes, it would be interesting to see what Carson Wentz did behind a good offensive line and a shit receiver core. Because it would be just like his Philly days then, right? Like good offensive line, shit receiver core. And this is an upgraded receiver core than what he had at the Eagles back then. It obviously would be a big tick down from Mahomes, but I would be curious to see it. Just out of curiosity. I do not believe he's good. He's not deserving of a starting spot, but when it comes to backups, he at least has experience, so that's good. Jump over to our QB3. This one, my QB3 and my QB2 actually ended at the exact same stat line before I did the show. However, who I chose at QB2, I haven't gone and adjusted their numbers, so out of spite, I put my QB3 down 1, even though I have him as the exact same points as of right now as my QB2, and that QB is Josh Allen. Josh Allen finished last year at QB1 through 17 games. His ADP right now is QB1, and ADP is the 35th pick overall. He lost Diggs. He lost Davis. It's a weird year to stat out. I was just going through his stats this morning and looking at that receiving core. You got, Shakir, Curtis Samuel, Keon Coleman, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. You got the tight ends in both Knox and Kincaid. You got James Cook, who's still there. It's an interesting year for Josh Allen because there's no doubt that he's going to throw for a lot of yards. I don't know who he's throwing to. Like I have my personal projections and guesses, but honestly, it kind of feels like that right now with how much this receiving core was flipped on its head. It feels like a guess as to who's getting it. So I'm a little bit down on his passing yards, but I also am slightly up on his rushing yards this year, which is interesting because he did not rush as much this last year is kind of how it felt. But he still got it done. Like, he got enough yards to keep you happy, enough plenty of touchdowns. So he's someone that I won't have any shares of him if he stays at QB1. I just don't often I probably won't have any shares of these top 4 guys. That's not how I personally draft in regards to redraft leagues. And best ball leagues. Maybe if one of them drops far enough, I could. But Josh Allen's a little bit of an interesting one for me. I don't doubt that he'll be a top 5 guy in fantasy. I don't think they drop off that much. He has too much running upside. He will be passing the ball. I actually like Shakir as a pass catcher, and I hope he takes more of a Stephon Diggs type of role where he gets hyper targeted because I think he could really handle that type of a consistency type quick dropping passes into him. Um, but it's going to be an interesting year from a receiver standpoint. But I don't think Josh Allen takes a huge step back. So I still have him at number 3, but I'm not willing to take him at number 1, especially with my number 1 QB. So I'll jump over to my number 2, which again, I could say this is 2A and 2B between these two guys. And honestly, I probably should just put a tier break between my number 1 and then 2, 3, and 4. But at number 2, he ended last year as QB2, played all 17 games. He's being drafted at QB2. So I'm right. I'm literally as consensus as it can be. Jalen Hurts is my number 2. They now have a much improved offensive coordinator, although I'm not someone who is like, oh, Kellen Moore is amazing. Absolutely love him. He's good. He's fine. And he's going to actually bring some movement into this offense, which is going to be super helpful for Jalen Hurts. I think they'll be able to switch up some of the coverages, switch up some of the play design so that they're not so destroyed on blitzes. They really struggled against the blitz last year and never made adjustments because we had a terrible offensive coordinator that couldn't switch anything. So I love Jalen Hurts. I think he will be great for fantasy. I think we'll see a little bit. I could see Jalen Hurts also dropping back to like QB4. I don't really see him dropping out of top 5, but I think there will be a little bit of a step back in regards to his touchdowns, rushing touchdowns. But I also see a little bit of an uptick in his passing. So a little bit of balance, but he'll lose a little bit more than he gains in regards to the touchdowns. I think they pass for more yards, though. I think they're more efficient as an offense. So as a whole, I really love it. I think Saquon being there doesn't really take away too much from him because we didn't see him running as much last year anyways. I think it only amplifies the amount of touchdowns this offense has, the amount of opportunities they have to score. So I think as a whole, all the changes kind of keep it pretty balanced for his fantasy. And he'll stay right around that QB2, QB3 range. With the upside to be QB1, as do any of these guys in top 4 here, and even top 6 really have a shot at being QB1. But I don't see the same opportunity that my number 1 guy has, and my number 1 guy, I am in the thing that sucks with it is I'm not gonna have pretty much any shares of them, and I'll get to it again with the question because it kind of touched on this a little bit. For my number 1 guy, like I said, I have over 30 points ahead of Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen because they're both tied on points right now in my rankings. But if you haven't figured it out, it's pretty obvious. He was QB4 last year, 16 games. ADP is QB3 with a 43rd pick in the draft. We have Lamar Jackson. I am so in on the Ravens just being an absolute dominant offense. I think that his passing is great. I think he's a much better passer than people realize, and his rushing is the best in the league. Like, he is the best QB rusher in the league. And the thing that's interesting to me this year is with the way he dropped the weight to be closer and how he has an opportunity to possibly break the record for most rushing yards by a QB in NFL history, like combined. I could easily see him putting up stupid numbers like that, 800 to 1,000 rushing yards this season, with the way he lost weight, the way he loves accolades. I feel like he wants that respect, and now that he's in striking distance of most rushing yards by a QB, I wouldn't be shocked if he just goes for it this year. Now, when you lose the weight, you have more opportunities to be, smacked up and injured. We'll see how he does there. He's gotten a lot better at protecting himself than he had in his early years. He, again, played a full season last year, and when he had the first spot locked up, he set the final game. He is amazing QB. I think week in, week out, he will be consistently hitting QB1 numbers. I'd be super ecstatic to have him, but I also don't often draft those top guys. I think Derrick Henry only helps him. I think the way that they're going to be able to move up the field with Derrick Henry versus, splitting between Hill, Gus Bus, and Keaton Mitchell, who Mitchell was actually pretty good, but he's injured and got injured at the end of last year. This is just an offense I'm all in on. I love it. I know in regards to the receivers and trying to stat out who is doing what besides, Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, it's a little harder to fully get, but they paid Bateman, so maybe there's an uptick with Bateman there. I'm someone who's always been a Bateman fan. When he watches all 22, he really knows how to get open, so I've been very confused as to why he hasn't had more production, but hopefully now that they're giving him money, we'll see more production. We'll see. But super all in on Lamar Jackson, by far my number one QB in a 4-point per passing touchdown league. So that is it for our QB rankings. I don't think there are too many absolute shockers out there compared to consensus, besides maybe kind of that back end with Justin Herbert coming in and maybe how low I am on Burrow. But and I guess that Kyler Murray is maybe shocking, but if you've talked to me fantasy over the last 3 months, I don't think you should be shocked that I have Kyler as high as I do. So we're going to jump over to our quick question. And this question came in from Joe. I'm excited because it's a very relevant to what we just talked about today and on Monday with Saad. So who is my personal, so talking to me, my personal priority target at QB in fantasy? When am I taking them? What's my plan of attack? So a little bit of the draft strategy as well in regards to QBs. So I think it's been pretty clear. My number one target is Kyler Murray. He's being drafted as QB8. However, I want to preface, I will be going for him. And that my draft strategy is built around that. In best ball, I have a very high share of him. He's my number one by far QB taken in best ball drafts. I'm able to take him in the 7th round. So I already have, a combination of running backs and receivers, 6 of them, before I'm even taking QB. Where I have him at QB, I have him in that top 5. So you know what? Getting a top 5 after drafting 6 other players, that seems awesome to me. I will say, though, potentially even better value than taking Kyler Murray might be Jordan Love, Dak Prescott. Those are 2 that I think when I don't get Kyler, say there's someone, because there are people out there that also love him as much as I do, and he will jump a bit. I typically then am looking at a Jordan Love or Dak Prescott, and I can take them. I mean, ADP wise, they go a full round. Jordan Love is a full round after Kyler, and then Dak Prescott is same thing. Both of them are 1 ADP away from each other, so they both go a full round after. I typically aim for one of them. Love Jordan Love. I love Dak Prescott for fantasy. And where they're both being picked at. So definitely aiming for Kyler. That's typically my build, but I really want one of those other 2 in Jordan or Dak if I miss on Kyler. I think for me in the past, I have gone very heavy on trying to find that super sleeper QB where I'm taking a QB late rounds. And to me this year, I think the upside with a guy like Kyler, Love, and Dak, where they're being drafted, is worth it to me to jump there. Normally, I'm really locking up depth and receivers and running backs and taking one of those late flyers like Trevor, Tua, Herbert, Cousins, like one of those guys that's going a little bit later, decent upside, not a top 5 upside, but they're going to be someone I'm really happy with week in and week out. But that's this year, I think it's really shifting for me. I did a little bit last year, and it really panned out, especially in best ball drafts. So best ball drafts, I've always done much more of a let's take 2 or 3 guys that are later that have upside, and maybe one guy that's just super risky and one safe, and then one just middle of the road upside. And it's been fine. Last year, I did in a couple of my big play tournament best ball drafts, I was going for the guys like this year that are, Kyler Murray being drafted as QB8 or Jordan Love at QB12 that I see having really, really high upside and spending that a little bit higher pick. And it really panned out. So in best ball, I'm not happy if I leave the draft without one of those 3. I'm very happy if I have Kyler. And then the other 2 I'm also happy with. But that's it for me in regards to my kind of plan of attack. I do want one of those top 12 QBs, and I think you can afford to pay for one of them right now with where they're being picked. If a draft went super heavy QB early, though, I would skip on all of them and just keep raking in the value at receiver and running back, though. Just to clarify. But yeah, right now Kyler's going in the 7th round in best balls, and I love that. I'm all in on that. Friday's stream, we are actually going to do either a mock draft or we're going to do a best ball tournament draft so you can see what I'm looking at, what I'm doing. And if we're doing that, if we're doing the tournament one, we will have pick clocks. It will be a full hour long show because they do take a little bit of time. But I'm very excited. We'll be able to talk through my thought processes when we're doing that. We'll be able to talk a little bit more about best ball. And if you're new to that, what it entails. But I will say best ball is where I make a huge chunk of my money in fantasy football each off season. And it's so fun to draft. If you love drafting, it's just like this extra, let's do some drafting, but let's put my money where my mouth is. Like, let's actually do this. I've always doubled or more my money. My worst year was double. I've gone years where I've gone, this five plus times what I put in though on best ball. It's a, great investment if you love drafting. It's a lot of fun. You can do some cheap drafts. You can do some more expensive drafts, whatever your preference is. And you get to choose, between small drafts of like 6 people, 10 people, 12 people, whatever you like. So I highly recommend best ball. Everyone that's in the live chat, this is the most talking that we've had in the live chat, so I really appreciate it. Pudding, thanks for being here. Saad, your mom is hot. Tiago, I hope I didn't miss anyone. I think Pin was in there at one point. Pin Sniper. Guys, thanks for being here. I know it's a little bit different than my streaming days where I would be talking to chat constantly. This is a podcast. We go live on YouTube. So for anyone that missed it, not live on YouTube, I post them all on YouTube after. On YouTube, if you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, No Chill Boom, the link is also here on Kick. It's also on my Twitter. We are doing a giveaway on Friday. All you have to do is be subscribed to YouTube. And as of right now, we pretty much have one person in the runnings for getting this. So, your odds are very high if you're interested in getting my ranking sheet, which is super awesome, super customizable. It'll be live updated all the time. So if you're into fantasy football, I think it's a really cool tool. And guess what? It would be free if you enter and win. So I appreciate you guys. Who's your dream podcast sponsor? I actually like that question. I think I'll answer that. Dream podcast sponsor. I actually don't think I've thought about that sort of a thing. I think for me and those that know me, I'm obsessed with energy drinks, so it probably had to be Raid Shadow Legends. That's funny. It would have to be an energy drink. I think as of right now, the most things I've been drinking is Freshen Up, Creed Berry, top tier. I'm a big Red Bull guy too. I have not had much of that recently, but absolutely, definitely any sort of energy drink would be awesome. Pristine Auction. I mean, if we're really talking football related, love Pristine Auction. Now, right now, I am currently looking for a job, and I am not spending my little saved money on Pristine Auction stuff, but you'll see me. I'll cycle through some different signed jerseys and stuff. I have probably 30 plus signed jerseys that I'll frame up and put in the background here and there from Pristine Auction, but one of those guys. So appreciate all of you guys being here. Really do. I absolutely love talking football. I love hearing how messed up you think my ratings are, or if there's something that maybe you learned from it. Again, I'll say this over and over and over. I want to provide the information, you guys, and that's the way I built my rankings. You can have my rankings and see exactly what it is, but I also made it so that you can also adjust it to what you like. Like I'm here to be an extra aid, kind of share my thoughts and hear yours, and I'm already someone that will reevaluate my takes. If something is really wild, like I'm reevaluating my Caleb Williams, making sure that I'm fair and honest on where I have him, my Geno Smith. There's lots of guys that I need to reevaluate. So appreciate you guys, and we will be back live on Friday. We'll have some type of draft. If it is a mock draft, I will open it up for anyone to jump in and join as well. And we'll have other people in it if it happens to be the best ball draft, which I'm kind of leaning towards right now. I mean, you can try and stream snipe into it. I'll give you a countdown as to when we're clicking join. But Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and it'll be just a little over an hour probably long. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you on Friday. And again, if you want to be in on that giveaway that we're doing Friday, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like the content. Appreciate y'all.